Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, welcome. I'm really glad you're here today. How are you holding up? How are your holidays going? If you are celebrating Hanukkah, how's it going? If you're celebrating Christmas, how's it going? If you're celebrating Kwanzaa, how's it going? What about Denali? I feel like I should be far more literate in the different holidays that people celebrate. I'm working on it. I'm not there yet. This has been a doozy of a year, hasn't it? This episode today with Rachel, I think you're really going to enjoy. She took the most recent Online HSP course. She's a nurse practitioner. She's got 2 kids. One is highly sensitive. And one of the reasons why she decided to take the course was she really wanted to learn more about her own traits and to be able to be present for her child. And we talk about this in the episode of how that's going for her and some of the things that she's really learned and that have been helpful for her in really learning to reparent herself and to show up for herself and to be present for her child. A couple of the things as you know, I record this intro as soon as I'm done recording the episode. And when we were talking, I could hear her kids playing in the background. I'm not sure if you're going to hear that post-production. The other thing is that Gracie was in here and there's a place where my dog has seizures. She's fine, but she had 2 seizures this morning. So she ends up being a little disoriented. And while we're recording, she's walking under my desk and she's bumping into things. And I stop and pick her up. So you're going to hear a little bit of a Gracie talk and noise in there. So there may be some sounds in here. I'm not sure with editing if they're going to be taken out or not, but I always like to give you a heads up of what's going on. I think you're going to really enjoy this episode, especially if you are learning more about the trait. What I love about the things that Rachel shares is how much she's learning to just really lean into her HS traits and how empowered she is. And it was interesting when we stopped recording, she said, did I talk too much, too positively about the traits? And what I said is, I really want people to embrace and lean into the strengths that we have. I'm a crier. I just know I am. And my kids know that. And I kind of talk with my kids sometimes about I worry. I'm really good at it. And that's what I do. That when we just know how we are and we can embrace it and lean into it, it really takes that shame away. And when we've gotten messages that how we show up in the world is not okay, and then we can go yep, this is how I am. So I think Rachel just does a beautiful job demonstrating how she is really starting to embrace a lot of her traits. And you'll hear we had some crazy things happen before we were able to actually record today. I've never had this happen before, and we were able to just kind of ride through it. I'm really excited. I'm hoping that by the time you hear this, it will be up and ready to go. You can look at the show notes. I have a merchandise store now where you can order podcast logo. We're going to have some stuff that says unapologetically sensitive podcast. Sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's my superpower. And these are items that you can go online and order. They will be shipped directly to you. I'm using a third-party printing. The company that I'm using is highly recommended. I've gotten merchandise in the past, and sometimes it works out really great and sometimes it doesn't. So I'm letting you know about this really early, but we need to order our samples to see how they turn out. But I'm really excited to be able to offer some things that are going to be empowering for people to wear. And we figured we'd keep the podcast in there in case you don't want to just walk around with something that says unapologetically sensitive. And I'd actually forgotten that I have some different versions of the logo that don't have the colors in them. And so we're putting that together. If you're interested in looking for merchandise, it's a great holiday gift. I don't think you will get it in time for the holidays by the time you hear this, but you can go to patriciayounglcsw.com to order the merchandise. And I think that's all I'm going to tell you for right now. So let me tell you a little bit about Rachel. Rachel Glick wants to live in a world where movie quotes are mentioned daily. I think this is how you say it, WERQ, WERQ, which is hip hop dance class, meets whenever she wants, and she can read books for 4 hours in the middle of the day. She has known she's an HSP for a long time, but hadn't fully tapped into it as a superpower. She recently started honoring it more in her daughter and decided she needed to do the same for herself. Rachel works part-time as a nurse practitioner. She is taking teaching virtual school while her husband works from home, one day at a time. I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. And now, on to the show. Hey, Rachel, welcome.
Hi, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here too. So we've just spent an hour and a half waiting to record because I went to reboot my computer and it took 55 minutes and then we couldn't log back in and then we had technical problems and we're just very persistent today. So yay us.
Go us. Yay.
Do you identify as a highly sensitive person?
Yes, I do.
And when did you find out you were highly sensitive?
You know, I remember Googling it probably 5 years ago. I actually Googled, why am I so sensitive and why do I cry in church when the music is being played? And then it came up and I started to learn more about it. But it wasn't until the past 6 months or so that I really started to dive deeper into it because of one of my daughters really got more into it with her and then thought I should figure it out for myself too.
Okay. What do you think of the term highly sensitive person?
I don't like the sensitive part just because our society, I feel, has quite a negative view towards it, especially, unfortunately, in terms of men. I don't think it's fair that way, but I think it accurately describes what we are.
Yeah. So let's get down to the good stuff.
Sure.
You took the most recent online HSP course, and then your group decided to continue through the month of December. So we've extended a little bit more. What has been your experience taking the course?
It's been incredible. It's been very eye-opening. I think often about the group, about you, about what we learned, what we've talked about. It's hard to describe in words, but it's really filled me up and spoke to my soul. And I will probably get emotional, and I'm a crier, and that's just fine. But it's been very important to me.
I'm a crier too.
I like that about you.
I like that about you too. What made you decide to take the course?
I found out about you through one of the podcasts that I'd been listening to about my daughter, where you had interviewed somebody who specializes in children. And then I started listening to your podcast and was really getting a lot out of it. And when listened to some of the interviews you had with people who had taken it before and just thinking, it's time to do this for myself. And it's been really hard with COVID, everything going on, and I needed something to do something for myself. And I thought this would be a good time to do it.
What were you hoping to get from the course?
I was hoping to learn more about the trait and how it affects me and how I interact with the world, and to connect with other HSPs and learn about their experiences.
Mm-hmm. How has your experience, did you feel like you got what you wanted from it?
Yes, I did. And more.
What's the more part?
The more is, I know I mentioned it, but it's this feeling of like a need inside of me to be. I have friends who are HSPs, but we're not part of the same friend group. And it's very different being in such a safe space with other people who are wired the same way, and to have you facilitating. And at the beginning of the group, after we have how are you ask us to say what we need from group. And I don't know if I've ever been asked before what I need. I've been asked, how can I help you? That kind of thing. But this was a really profound question, I felt like. And I mean, that was one of the big things I got, is what do I need?
Yeah. It's so much of what I'm learning with HSPs is we really look to the outside world to figure out, how do we fit in? What are the rules? What do we need to do? And what my experience is in working with as many HSPs as I have is it's really about learning how to turn inward and to figure out, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? What am I needing? And instead of trying to figure out from the outside, am I okay? Is this okay? And we talk about this in the check-in, that this time is for you to show up and be exactly who you are, that it's not a time when you have to figure out how to behave or try and be like the other 80%, that it really is a time for you to be who you are. And what I hear, that was really helpful for you to start to turn inward.
Extremely.
Yeah.
That first question you asked. Yes.
Yeah. Do you find yourself asking yourself that throughout the week?
I do. I found me asking that and me answering myself honestly. I found my level of self-compassion has gone way up. It's kind of brought a whole new perspective to not only everyday current life, but also things that have gone on in my past.
Mm-hmm.
It's been so incredibly validating and powerful for me.
Yeah, I think when we can bring in that self-compassion, I think people initially start out not wanting to be HSPs. I'm not saying everybody, but they don't want the trait. They want to be different, and they think that they're going to learn how to change who they are. And I'm very clear that is not the work that I do. You do learn tools and ways to work with the traits that we have. And it's also about really leaning into it, but that self-compassion piece, because the reality is, I don't care who you are, we all struggle with stuff. And when we can go like, I'm struggling, and have self-compassion with it, that allows us to change and to lean into it. But when we have that, I hate this, I don't like that this is going on, I don't want it to go on, we go into resistance. I see you shaking your head. So tell me what you're thinking.
Yes, that's exactly what you were
nodding your head.
Yeah, I was
shaking
nodding.
I always have to go shaking. No, nodding is yes. You were nodding your head.
I knew what you meant. Yes, I was nodding because I felt the same way before. I would think, why am I like this? Why can't I be normal? Why do I think this way? And that's not helpful. And in the group, one of the big things of the many things I got was that what you're feeling is what you're feeling, and that's just fine. And feel it. And then you can move through it. And that was also something that was mind blowing to me.
Can you say a little bit more about that?
Sure. In the past, and I know I mentioned this in group, when I would start crying frequently throughout the day, I felt like I was slipping into a depression. And it was a story I'd been telling myself. During one of our sessions, one of our groups, I had a very vulnerable moment where I just couldn't stop crying. And you were asking me in front of everybody, what else? What else? What else? And I never unloaded like that. Certainly not in front of other people. It was a way for me to kind of rewrite these deep emotions that I have, and going forward, how I handle them and how I embrace them. For example, the other day I was listening to a podcast with my daughters called Rebel Girls Podcast. And there was a story on there about a refugee from Syria. And I started crying when I was listening to the storyteller tell the story. And my kids were, concerned about why I was crying. And I feel like I'm having to reteach them. Just because I'm crying, it's okay. That's the way I am. Of course I'm crying. This is an incredibly touching story I'm listening to. And thank God there are people like me in the world who feel this deeply about these things. And I'm not trying to brag, but it really is putting a new perspective on things when it's something I can embrace and really love about myself.
Well, I love that. What I hear is that you're really honoring and respecting who you are and how you show up. And because we know for sure that one of your girls is also highly sensitive, you're modeling it's okay to have your feelings. It's okay to show your feelings. It's okay to be vulnerable. Like, I'm okay. I mean, that is probably one of the best ways that you can model resilience to your daughter.
Yes, I found myself many times telling her, it's okay, feel what you're feeling. And I've started to tell myself that too. Just feel it when I'm having those intense emotions, because trying to deny them is going to make it worse, and not even worse. It will make them come out in a different way. And I need them. I need to feel them because I'm a feeler.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't ask for permission to talk about this before we recorded because I wasn't thinking about it. So if you're not comfortable, don't answer it and we'll just take it out.
Sure.
But there was a really pivotal point, I think for you, that you had talked about having a very feeling day and that it was a bad day. Do you know what I'm referring to?
Yes, I do.
Do you want to finish the story from here?
Sure. I was crying a lot throughout the day and worried again that I was becoming depressed or sinking into a depression. And you said, what if those are emotionally intense moments you're having throughout the day? Maybe it's an emotionally intense day for you. I had to sit with that a little bit. A few days later, I started to have an emotionally intense moment. And I told myself that that's what it is, Rachel. It's emotionally intense and it's okay, and feel it. And that was also very liberating for me to be able to change the definition of these things I'm feeling to be emotionally intense, because that's exactly what it is. It's not always just sadness, because there's a lot of emotions that can come together. I even started referring it, I was texting a group of friends and said, guys, I'm having an emotionally tense day. I kind of explained what that was, and they were very on board with it and really appreciated hearing that phrase.
And I what I love about this, so I have to tell y'all, Gracie's on the floor. She just climbed under the desk. She had a seizure, 2 seizures this morning, and she's very disoriented. So I'm a little bit distracted. And I don't think you'll hear any of this post-production, but I'm trying to figure out what to do with her because she was bumping around under the desk. Hang on.
Whatever you need to do, Patricia.
All right. We'll see if this works. She's on my lap, but this is going to be a little challenging.
It's so cute.
But we spent an hour and a half waiting to record, so we'll just go with it. What I love about this is we often get messages that we're too intense, we're too emotional, we're too dramatic. I think depression is a real thing. I'm not saying if you have depression and you're on medication, it's not a real thing. But I also think that for some of us that we have intense feelings and we do interpret it as depression, or we label things and then we feel bad, and then that kind of sends us spiraling down. And what I love is your willingness to create a new narrative, a new story about what was going on, that you kind of thought, was it really a bad day? No, it was just a lot of intense feelings. And that can be challenging. It can be exhausting. And that's very different than being depressed. And I know, is it okay to talk a little bit about that day when you processed your feelings?
Sure.
What I recall is that you were concerned that you really didn't know what you were going to say, and was it okay to talk about it? And it just kind of might open up a can of worms. Is that an accurate reflection?
Yes, and that I was taking up too much of the group time.
Yeah, yeah. And how many other people in group have you heard have that same concern?
Yes. All I can say is yes, I have.
So you're not the only one. And I was thinking that your group is very cohesive. All 5 of you decided to continue on for the month of December. It's a very diverse group. So you're all women, but age-wise, y'all are different. Marital status is different. I think you're the only person that has kids.
One other does.
You're right. Sorry, other person that has kids.
It's okay. I talk about mine way more in the group.
And so even with the differences, that there's such a cohesion in the connection that you have. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I was kind of surprised by that too. But I think with HSPs, we go deep quickly, which is another thing I love about us. We went deep quickly right away. The conversation has an organic flow to it. But also I feel like you're aware and able to kind of tune into what each of us needs as well. Or if somebody is being quieter, you don't force them, but you just want to check in with them and make sure that they're okay and see what they need. Yeah, I feel like even though we come from different backgrounds, different religions, ages, like you said, that kind of thing, there's still such a camaraderie we have. And I remember one of the women saying, maybe I put the words into her mouth, but it's like we're part of the same tribe where we speak the same language. Mm-hmm. And that's a very powerful thing.
Yeah. And just an aside, my understanding is, and I'm just saying this out loud, this isn't against you. My understanding is that using the word tribe is misappropriation, because that's used for Native American folks. I've started to say my peeps instead of using the word tribe. And I don't think that people know. And
I'm glad you told me that. Thank you. Yes. We found our people.
Yeah.
That's better.
Yeah. Yeah. And we had talked about on the first group that not everybody is in the same place politically. And so we had to make a decision as a group that we weren't going to talk about politics. And we went through the election process during the group, but we were able, people that needed to talk about it, we found a way to discuss it and do it in a way that was respectful. So again, you can have differences and there's still a lot of cohesion in the group with that connection, which I think is really, really important.
I agree. And I think we're also very respectful of each other, but people bring up different things. And that's been very interesting to hear other people's perspectives and also kind of think, yeah, I see what they mean by that and how that resonates with me.
Yeah. It feels like everybody is going through something different in their life. And I think that we have this thing of, I want to be with other moms, or I want to be with other people that are the same place in their career or their marriage or in dating. And I'm thinking across the board that y'all are in very, very different places. And there's still been this really strong sense of connection and cohesion in spite of all having some, I don't know if significant differences, but differences.
Yes, I agree. I think too, it's the power of the group, because I'd been in therapy in the past, and there was something so powerful about being in this group with people who are wired the same way. That's different than doing it as an individual, or even meeting with an HSP friend, which is wonderful too, but this is different. And like you said, even though we are from different places, different backgrounds, different experiences, there's so much we have in common. And it's just like after that, when we were doing that first group, I was thinking, I don't want this to end. Like I could keep talking like this all night. This is just fantastic. It was filling my soul.
Mm-hmm. You had the week where you cried, you talked about what was going on. And then the next week, you had a concern about.
The next week, I did the same thing. There's something about when we did the beginning, the how the are you? And then it was something for me that just like shifted, and I started crying. And we had our mics and our phones and our cameras off. But I think that was a chance for me. It was a safe place. I knew it was to just kind of let down from the day. I know how in tune everybody is, and wanted to make sure I was okay. And I was concerned I was taking up too much time when I'd had time from the last time. And you had me do a reality check. That was incredible.
Can you just explain what that reality check looked like?
Sure, it really was a reality check. Patricia helped me form the words, but what I wanted to ask everybody was how my experience was kind of impacting them, like my time during this group, how that was impacting them. I was afraid to ask, I guess.
What did you imagine people would say?
I was like, of course they're going to say it's fine. They're polite people. They would never say, no, you are taking too much time. Like, let's move on. And they didn't say that, but they did say much more powerful things of how what I was experiencing and processing with you and everybody else, how that was impacting them in a profound manner. I don't want to say positive manner, but that it was useful for them too. I was telling a friend a little bit about it because I feel like I couldn't totally describe it, but that's never happened to me before. And wow. And now I've started using reality checks in my life too. I really, really like that tool.
Yeah, it's very powerful, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And I think what happens is we get a story in our head of what we think is going on, and we don't want to ask because we're sure that either people are going to go like, no, it's not bothering me, or they're going to go, yeah, you are too much. Mm-hmm. And inevitably this happens in every single group, that people will go like, I get so much out of when you share, and I learn so much, and I have so much empathy, and it reminds me of things I want to talk about. And it really is such a healing, connecting thing. And what I believe happens for us is that we get very intellectual. So we know we have these wounds. We do all this reading. We intellectually can tell you what we're struggling with. but the healing comes from doing the feeling work. And we have to do that with other people. And we can do it in therapy. And there's something really powerful about when you're with a group of peers and they're not being paid to be nice to you. They're not your partner. They really have no investment into making you feel good, that for some reason, and having more than one person agree, there's something really powerful that happens. It's really transformational and healing in that process. You look teary and you're nodding your head. So tell me what you're thinking and feeling.
I'm thinking and feeling very grateful because I shared some things in that group that I've never shared, not even in therapy. Just the response, the support was incredible. And then I'm also thinking about what was shared from other people as well. And I remember I wanted to just, I wish we could have hugged each other at some point. And I remember I told somebody, I wish I could give you a hug. And she said, well, I'm not good at receiving hugs. And I said, that's okay. I'm not great at giving them, but we're giving each other emotional hugs, being able to open up like that in a new way. And that's why, another reason why I'm feeling very emotional.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's been really powerful. How do you recall what the first group was like, the very first week? Were you nervous?
Yes, I was nervous.
What were you thinking, or what were you concerned, or what was going on before group?
Well, I'm a little embarrassed to admit this because I'm trying to fight against the patriarchy, but I did put on makeup and tried to make sure my hair looked nice before we got on camera. And then I realized I didn't need to do that anymore, just because we were there just to be there as human beings. Not, obviously it didn't matter what we looked like, but that first group, I feel like pretty quickly we got into, I think I started crying right away, but I could sense that this was a safe place for me to do that. Mm-hmm. I think that first session, again, I didn't want it to end. And I was thinking about everybody all week long. I think the next group after that, we added somebody, and that was really cool because I wouldn't say it changed the dynamic, but it added to it. It was even more rich.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I normally do not add somebody, but this is somebody that I knew and she wanted to join, and it really has been a lovely addition.
Yes, I'm really glad for it.
Yeah, yeah. And you're not the only person that has that fear of, I can think of 3 people who've shared, said, like, I shared too much last week. I don't think I should share this week. And I'm holding back because of that fear of taking up too much space, of being too much.
Right. And I think also we all have different personalities. Even though we're HSPs, we have different personalities. And so some of us are more comfortable sharing. Some of us are more introspective, but that doesn't mean they're any less present or that we don't feel the support in the same way. And again, Patricia, I feel like you check in and don't make people uncomfortable, but want to know that we're all there to be seen and heard.
The introverts, I often will message them privately. Mm-hmm. Hey, I just want to check in. Are you doing okay? Because as an extrovert, I want to talk about everything that's going on. And I know that introverts have a lot going on and they're processing, and they just don't need to share out loud what's going on. And I often don't want people to feel like I'm calling them out, but I often will use the chat function to check in, like, hey, just want to check in. How you doing? I
think that's great. And I know somebody chatted me too when they saw me starting to tear up to check if I was okay. That's just, it was just another way to feel so supported.
Yeah. I'm curious to know, if you have that wound of too much and you have to get a reality check, but then you see somebody else having that wound of too much and getting a reality check, what is that like for you?
It's very powerful, and it forces me to also think about my relationship to that and what's going on inside me, and really try to get to the truth of kind of tear away everything else and really, like, what's the underlying emotion that's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know we had another person do a reality check, and that was really, really something too. Good to be part of on the other end of it.
Does it change that narrative that we have of like, I'm too much, I'm taking up too much space. And then to see somebody else who has that same narrative, the way that you were thinking you were being too much, and then they said it, did you have that like, yeah, of course you are? What was your sense when you heard somebody else sharing that based on how you think people are perceiving you?
When I had somebody else sharing that they thought they were too much also, well, my response was, well, in my head, and then I think I formed what I wanted to say was, oh my gosh, I want you here. I want to hear this. Like, this is important stuff. Like, that does not factor into it. And it was surprising because I also thought it was somebody who was pretty confident. So to hear that, to hear what was underlying that was like, wow, that's really powerful that she opened up that way too. And that we could come kind of surround her with our love.
I think there's this myth of people that appear to be confident and successful don't have fears and don't have worries and don't have those things. And the truth is we have it too. Just some people don't talk about it, which is one of the reasons why I'm so committed to talking about the things that I struggle with. Because what I've learned is I feel the stuff, I talk about it, and then I do what I need to do for the most part. I mean, I still have times when I don't do that, but I think that we don't talk about it enough. And so we think that there's something wrong with us or we're inadequate because we have these thoughts and feelings. And I just want to normalize, like, we all have gremlins. We all have them. And when we can see them in somebody else, it doesn't feel as repulsive or revolting or as repelling as we feel. And so I think that's a really powerful process.
I totally agree. And I remember one of your episodes, I heard you were talking and said that a good way to look at it is a lot of people think humans are thinking people with emotions. We're actually highly emotional people with a little bit of thinking. But we aren't taught what to do with these emotions from a very young age. Society, I mean, I'm thinking like this should be taught in school. Like, kids need to know this. It's just, I don't know what it is about society or us as humankind, but emotions are very scary and they don't have to be. They shouldn't be.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you're someone who feels things very deeply, to know that it's okay and it's normal to have intense and strong feelings, that is just a game changer.
It very much is, knowing that you're okay, that I'm fine just the way I am. And it's actually a very good thing that we have people like us.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to talk in a vague way about something that happened at we went through our 10 weeks, and on the 10th week, we do closure. We talk about what people have gotten from the course, because we integrate this stuff and we don't know that we've integrated it. And really, I think it's, quote, too early to be talking to you about this, but I just wanted to bring you on and to talk about this. So maybe I think that you're still integrating. But at the last meeting, there were 5 of you and one person didn't show up. And we didn't know what happened. And one person was supposed to continue the next 5 weeks, and at the last minute called and said that they couldn't make it, but we didn't really know what was going on. And as part of our closure process, we talked about what is that like not having them here. And we didn't know if the person that was going to continue in December was going to continue or not. It was just kind of a very vague message. Can you talk a little bit about how that group was and how it was talking about that process, just talking about what is it like not being able to do closure?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm very appreciative that you wanted us to express ourselves how we felt about it. It felt a little unsettling to not know what was happening with the one woman, and also not have the other one there to say goodbye. I was hurt. That's something that was fine that I was feeling, because we kind of talked about it as a group too, that we were hurt, and I'm not trying to say how other people felt.
And I'm going to interrupt you for a second. That if you're one of the 2 people that were that were not there, that the intention in this is to talk about what came from that, and this is not to say that you did anything wrong. And I want to be very clear. You and I talked a little. We started to talk about this before we recorded, and we decided to hold off until we recorded. Again, my intention is not to call anybody out. It's what happened as a result of that, which I think is I'm not even going to say what I think it is. You're going to have to listen to the rest of the conversation if I stop interrupting you.
Right.
So go ahead.
Well, so Patricia, at the end, after we kind of shared our feelings about that, you suggested we reach out, which I think we probably had planned to do, but what you suggested was say kind of how we felt about it, how it affected us, and that own that on ourselves, to not put that on them, but just tell them what was going on, what we were feeling. I did that privately, and then we got a group email back that was incredible from one of the members. That was so powerful that I cried when I read it. It was just kind of like she laid it all out there for us. It's the thing that I love about humans. I loved that openness. You and I kind of emailed about it too, but just like I didn't have words to say how profound that was. Responded back to that and how courageous I thought that was, that she opened up completely. I was so glad that she was continuing as well. And then I feel like a few days later, we got another nice surprise from the other member that had decided to continue. And I just felt like my heart was filling up a little more, like, oh yes, we'll all be together longer.
Right. And what I think is so powerful about this is we all felt that like, oh, they're not here. We don't get to say goodbye, that sadness. And so my intention in telling people to reach out was not to shame anybody, but to let them know how their absence impacted us and that felt like a loss. When we have this wound of too much, we often have the wound of not enough. I have it. I'm not going to go, I'm tired. No one's going to miss me. It's funny. Even Sarah Buena, who was a guest on the podcast and I was on her podcast, I sent her something and I said, like, I don't know if you know what I look like. And she's like, of course I know what you look like. I have this thing like people don't know who I am. So we often have that wound of, nobody's going to notice that I'm gone. And what happened is one of the people was just really up against her demons. I mean, really up against her demons. And I think that our heartfelt messages of how we were impacted by her and how it felt sad to not have that sense of closure gave her a chance to work through some pretty intense shame. And I'm not even going to call them gremlins. I'm going to call them demons, and kind of pulled her back in. And often what we think of, well, she wasn't here and it probably doesn't matter. We're not going to talk about it. When we open our hearts and we communicate with love and kindness, that shone love on her demons. And she was able to come back and say, I was in, this is what was going on. And, thank you for reaching out. And then she decided to continue. And then the other person was not going to continue. And then she decided to continue as well. And what I love is when we speak from our hearts, that's where that connection comes from. And I think we often have this narrative of like, it doesn't matter. I don't matter. There was just such profound communication from everybody in a group email that shared how they felt. And then the responses from these people, it just made my heart smile.
I felt the same way. And it makes me think too, how many people in our lives are feeling that way, or in life in general. And why aren't we telling them how we feel? And again, I'm on the verge of tears because it's such a part of being human, is to know that you matter and that people care.
Yeah.
And we really do. And I think it's so good to be reminded of that and to tell people.
We're wired for connection. I really think that we want that sense of connection, and we're not taught how to talk about things. We're not taught how to grieve. I think so many of us have experienced so much loss and friendship loss, and I never learned how to do it. I just said, like, I'm fine and I move on. And so having an opportunity to talk about what does that feel like to not have them here and to not have them communicate. And it's probably going to activate previous losses, just to see how beautifully it ended up being such a warm way to connect with everybody.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. Very much so.
And it's interesting. Just, y'all know I've been really struggling with COVID and my mood. It's just been brutal, as Glennon Doyle says, brutal and beautiful. And I don't feel like I've been as present for my kids. And today something just snapped in me and I thought, I really need to tell them how much I love them and appreciate them. And I sent them a text, and it was so sweet. One of my sons is like, I love you too. And, says, I don't feel like you haven't been present. And the other one also responded, in a very loving way. And I feel like the feelings have just been so intense, and it's just enough to kind of muddle through what goes on a day-to-day basis that I just do not have a lot of kumbaya, namaste, lovey-lovey outside of just what I do on day-to-day survival. And so it felt really nice to have that just sweet connection for a little bit. And like Rachel said, is there somebody that you need to tell that you love them or you appreciate them or you're proud of them or they said or did something that you think about or you have something that they gave you that you think of them all the time? I mean, we want to know that we matter, and those little things can be really, really important. And with the holidays, actually what kind of spurred this on is my son had called to ask, if I had ideas on what he could get my mom. And I said, write her something. We always want to know how much we make a difference in people's lives. And my son and his girlfriend said, we like to hear that too. And it was a reminder.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I mean, not that we have to get into this, but that reminded me a little bit of our last group when we were talking about the gift giving, and maybe something of what's going on deeper than that is what we're trying to communicate to each other.
Yeah.
About the depth of our feelings.
Yeah. So one of the things that if you want to have your kids give a gift to the other parent is have them write down for them 10 things that they appreciate about the other parent, or a special memory. That my kids would do that when I was young, and I love it. And then last Christmas I had the boys, I asked them questions like, they wrote it about my husband, what's the thing that I say when I get mad? What are my favorite meals? I just looked up some crazy questions, and I got to tell you, my husband just loved that. So especially this year with things being tight, just telling somebody how much they mean to you and how much they matter, or to share a memory, that stuff is precious.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Was there anything unexpected that happened in the group that, you really couldn't have anticipated happening?
When I would listen to some of the podcasts where you would interview people who'd done the group before, and I would hear this, it seemed like they got along really well and they were really close. And I was trying to not set myself up for that going into the group because I didn't want to be disappointed. I felt like it was better to have not lower expectations, but just be okay with whatever would happen. So I actually wasn't that much expecting to find my people as much as I did.
Mm-hmm. It's such a hard thing. And I'm so aware every time I do an interview like this, because the magic of the course. And one of the things that I ask everybody is, if you just did this as you just had the materials and not the group, would that be of value? Well, let me ask you, if someone were to just take the course and have the videos and what you get in the email, do you think that would be valuable?
No, I don't. It's the power of coming together as a group. Yeah.
And so people take the course wanting to have that and to learn about the traits. And then I can't guarantee if there's going to be cohesion or not. So it's really, it's a fine line of, you can come in wanting it, but we don't have any control over what happens. I do have to say though, that I'm not sure if by the time you hear this, I have packaged the course so that sometimes people aren't ready for the group experience and they really just want the information. So I have packaged the course that you can buy it as a standalone course without the group. And I think for some people, that's a good place to start if you're not ready to do group work and you want to learn more about the trait, but you're not so sure that you really want to be in a group of people. Mm-hmm. But it's a hard thing, to come in wanting that and know that we don't know if that's going to happen or not.
Right. Yeah. And to be okay with it either way.
Yeah.
But I feel like more than likely, even if the whole group isn't a huge bonded moment, there will likely be connections between a few people that will be pretty powerful.
Yeah. I think I don't want to say what I was going to say.
Okay.
If someone's thinking about the course and they're like, that's a lot of money and I don't really know. I know a lot about being an HSP. Like, why would I want to take the course? Is there anything that you would say to them?
I would say do it. It's a form of self-love, self-care. It's money very well spent. It's transformational. Yes, do it.
Yeah, it's hard. I see things that are offered all the time and I'm like, why would I want to take it? And I think that's been the hardest thing to articulate. I probably shouldn't say this. My experience is that HSPs can be a really hard sell. And I'm that way. Am I going to like this? Am I going to fit in? Is it going to be good? Is it going to be value? So I'm probably right up there and really having a hard time pulling the trigger on things. And often I'll have to ask my husband, he's like, just go for it. Go for it.
Yeah.
I think that we often have so many considerations and we're just not sure.
I get that. And so I'd been listening to your podcast for a couple months, and then I saw that you were offering a group coming up, and I was kind of like should I, shouldn't I, should I, should talk to my husband to see if it would fit in with his schedule. And I was like, I definitely should. And that's what I would say to anybody considering is definitely should.
Yeah. Is there anything that I haven't asked you about the group or about your experience that you think is important to cover?
I just wrote down a few things, so just to make sure I didn't miss anything. No, I'm so grateful, and I'm glad we're continuing, and thank you.
Well, I want to know what you wrote down that you didn't say.
Not too much, because I think I talked about a big thing for me was the emotions and the validation. And now I have the power. I feel like I've been given the power to validate myself, and I will have that with me forever. And sometimes I imagine even myself like cradling myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's works very well for me. And since I'm a mom, the other thing you said was like, oh, honey, like touch your heart and that. And that's another thing that's very useful to me. I just feel like I have this inner strength that's always been there. And now it's bursting out, the power to validate and heal myself.
Has it changed in how you're showing up for your kids, especially your highly sensitive child?
Yes, very much so. We are speaking to a parenting coach, which has been really helpful for highly sensitive kids. But this was another piece that needed to be done. And I'm so glad I went through with it, because I need to understand myself in order to be there for her the way she needs me to be there. So these two parts coming together are what we needed.
Well, and I think that what happens is when we don't get compassion from our parents about the parts of us that we struggle with, we tend to do the same thing to ourselves. We shut that down. And when it shows up in our kids, we don't want to see it. So we shut it down too. So I'm wondering, since you've been able to not model, but to be more compassionate with yourself, how is that showing up in your relationship with your kids when they model behavior that you may have struggled with before, that you're being more compassionate with yourself? What do you see?
Yes, it completely does. I still struggle, but when they're feeling these intense feelings, especially my oldest, I can see myself in her and the underlying need to be seen and heard. Because if I just brush over it and try to make everything better, that's a terrible feeling. As adults, we don't like it. Why would we like it as kids? And then we don't want them to learn that. So yes, I'm very grateful that I can offer this to her, so she can see what I'm doing for myself.
Yeah, my guess is that you're changing her life by you learning to take care of yourself and be present for you. You allow that for yourself. And we talked a little bit about, before we recorded, learning how to do repair work with your kids. Mm-hmm. I've certainly had my share of terribly poor parenting moments, including biting my child because he bit me and I reflexively bit him back. I don't recommend it.
It happens.
I worked for Child Protective Services and then took leave when I had my kids. And I remember calling a colleague, like, if I leave a mark, do I have to report myself? I was not proud of it. And I just, we spent 45 minutes trying to get him to sit in timeout, which I do not recommend. And I didn't know what to do as a parent. Mm-hmm. And repair work is so powerful. And the truth is, we don't want to be perfect parents. Our kids will think that they have to be perfect. And the truth is, we're messy, complicated human beings. And when we make a mistake, we want to teach our kids, what do you do when you make a mistake? And that's really where the power of the relationship can come in. And you talked a little bit about how that's going with one of your kids.
Yes. And I want to back up just a second, Patricia. I remember in one of the first sessions, I said that I'm a mom, and you said, parenting's very messy. You'll screw it up. And I remember my first thought was, well, no, I won't, because I'm reading all these parenting books. I'm talking to a coach, and I actually am going to be perfect. But obviously, I have learned that that's not possible and that's not healthy. And yes, I have been able to do this with even my 4-year-old, but my 7-year-old, who especially feels deep things, I've been circling back and, hey, I thought about this. And when I said this, I really wish I would have said this, because this was what I was feeling. And it's like unlocked something in her too, where she's able to share. That makes my heart soar.
Yeah. And we were talking in the hour that we spent on the phone before we actually got to record, well, an hour and a half later, that your daughter was sharing something with you and you put words to what you thought she was feeling. So you legitimized and validated and gave her language to talk about feeling jealous, and that there's nothing wrong with feeling jealous, and that we all feel jealous sometimes, and that there's nothing wrong with it. But many of us were told that that's a bad thing.
Right. Letting her feel what she's feeling, jealousy, sadness, anger, and all the other emotions, but feeling it. That's the important thing, in validating it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think having language for our feelings and knowing that it's okay to be angry, sad, frustrated, disappointed, and that the adults around the children can tolerate that. And then obviously when we grow up, that as adults, we also have relationships with other adults that can tolerate all of the feelings. And I don't even like using positive and negative feelings. Like, there are feelings that are more challenging or more uncomfortable to feel. But if we don't allow room for those, then we cannot genuinely experience and feel the joy and the happiness and all of those desirable feelings, because they come together. We need to be able to honor both of them.
I like that too. And I feel like with the course, yes, HSPs feel those stronger emotions very deeply, but we also feel the other emotions deeply too. And one of the things that I've realized is a superpower for me is, like, I can laugh at a joke that I heard 20 years ago. It'll still make me laugh. I can still get joy from things that have happened a long time ago. And that's a wonderful thing too about being an HSP.
Absolutely. Rachel, is there anything else that you want to mention before we end?
Thank you. I would like to say
thank
you. This was really nice.
Yeah, thank you for your patience tonight. I've never had to wait an hour and a half to start a recording.
We had a nice talk.
We did have a nice talk. Well, thank you so much for being here, and I will see you in group in a couple days. And
thank you.
I really appreciate you.
I really appreciate you too. Thank you.
All right. Have a good evening.
Bye. You too.
Hey again. So I'm wondering, what did you think? It really took a lot of persistence on Rachel's part. I was so grateful she was willing to hang in with me for an hour and a half before we could start to record. That's perseverance. I love that. A couple of things I want to tell you about. There are people that are not really ready to do the group work, but they want to learn more about the trait of being an HSP. And again, I'm hoping that this will be set up by the time you hear this, but you can keep checking back again at patriciayounglcsw.com. We are setting up the Online HSP course. What you get is there are at least 10 videos. There may be more. There's the weekly email that I send out. It's got all of the prompts, the homework. There are often links to other resources. Sometimes books are mentioned. So it's basically a self-study course. The feedback that I've gotten from people who've taken the course is, if you just watch the videos, it's totally different. I think that there are people who are not ready to do group work, but they want to start learning about the trait of being an HSP. And I think that this is a great intro to do it. It's much less than what it costs to take the group, so you just get the self-study materials. If you're interested in taking the Online HSP course, I will be launching courses in January, I think the week of the 10th or 11th. They're starting to fill up, and they will close when we hit our maximum of 8. So if you're interested, I would encourage you to sign up before the slots get filled. They really are very powerful. I think that they're transformative. And what I'm seeing is, this has been a hard year, y'all. I know it. You know it. How we get that sense of bounce back and resiliency is being seen and heard and being with other people that really get us. These groups are so incredibly safe and structured. There's still room to share. There's room to talk about the things that are going on and learn about the trait of being an HSP while being in a group of people who really get who you are. I can't say enough about them. I love running groups. I love doing the group work. If you're interested, you can find out more about them in the show notes or at unapologeticallysensitive.com. There's a tab for the online, I think it says HSP groups. If this is the first time you're listening to the podcast and you don't know what I'm talking about, there are some podcasts that are listed on that page. I've interviewed people from previous courses so that you get to hear what it's like for somebody going through the course. My hope is, as we're rolling into the end of the year, that you take some time and reflect about what this year has been like and maybe what the things that have been challenging. So much has been out of our control. It's been a crazy grass year for us. And the things that we've struggled with, maybe things that we want to work on for the next year. And we often can figure out what we want from things that we didn't get or things that didn't work out. I love doing year-end writing where I reflect on the year about how it's gone personally, professionally, financially, with my spirituality, with friendships, my relationship with my body, where I'm at health-wise. I like to write about those things. I usually look back to the previous year before I write. And then I talk about the following year, what it is that I want to create and set some goals. And so this really is a nice time of the year to do some reflecting, to think about what worked, what didn't work, what we want to get more of in the next year. I'll tell you, there's something that's happened with COVID where my attachment injuries, you should just be grateful you're not married to me. It has been really challenging. And as I've talked about the struggles that I'm having, I'm getting some healing, but I feel like it's just been brutal. And we go through periods, I think we've been under so much stress this year and so much uncertainty and so much nonsense and craziness. It may be activating stuff for you. My hope is that you have at least one person that you can talk to get support around whatever's going on. I think we really need to have that mirroring, that support, that validation. I am so grateful to those of you in my life who are here for me and really support me. I support you too. It's not a one-way thing. But we've got to have people that get us. And if you don't have that, please find a way to create that. If it means having to find a therapist or coaching. At this point, I'm pretty full. I may have one or two slots. I'm not sure how things are going to look through the holiday or the new year. I love doing individual work. I love doing group work. So if you're interested in working with me, you can reach out to me at unapologeticallysensitive@gmail.com. My hope is that you're managing. My hope is you're feeling some joy. You're appreciating some of the traits that you have about being an HSP. A lot of the people that are in the closed Facebook group, Unapologetically Sensitive, I hear a lot about the wounding and struggling with the trait. There are some challenges that come with being a highly sensitive person. I think when we hate the trait and we struggle with a lot of things, there's often wounding from childhood emotional neglect. We've had parents that are emotionally immature. There's been abuse, there's been neglect, and we haven't learned the skills. That is not about the trait of being a highly sensitive person. There's codependency and boundary issues that get mixed in. That is not about being a highly sensitive person. Being a highly sensitive person is a trait. It's neither positive or negative. It comes with some challenges. It comes with some amazing strengths. And if you're struggling and not thriving, please, please, please learn more about the trait. Find other HSPs that have done their work to connect with, because we are the change makers. The world needs us. We are the glue that holds things together. We're the justice makers, the peacemakers. We're creatives. We have so many gifts to offer the world, and it means that we get to do our own work so we really can do the work that we were meant to be here for. I am now done with my TED Talk. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's our superpower. Have a blessed day.